Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of If You Could Hide to Kolob podcast. My name is Clive, and this is my brother Daniel.
Good morning.
Daniel, what are we doing here? Why are we here? And how did we get to this point?
Very good question, Clive. Well, a couple of weeks ago, a video came across my social media of a man who had done some recordings with the church and other various platforms. And I was just inspired by this amazing conversion story. And seriously, within 10 seconds, I just had this idea. I really want to talk to this person. And so I reached out to him and we had a little bit of a conversation and it was so great. And then I was just blown away. I was looking up more things online and I was just really inspired. And then we talked a number of times and we had a chat with this man last week and he messaged us and said, hey, I think we're chatting this afternoon, but I'm still at the temple. And then sent this amazing picture of him outside the temple in Arizona. And I just love that so much. So we're interviewing today a man by the name of Michael Germain Mansfield. Welcome to the podcast, mate. It's great to have you.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, maybe if you kick us off, we know of this story. Essentially, you know, I've heard it, in terms of when you were 13 years old and you started smoking. I actually wanted to ask you about what was life like before that. What were you like as a younger man in your where did you grow up? What was life like for you? Maybe if you can give us some of those insights.
I was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, and lived in Hawaii till I was about 7 or 8 years old. And then my mom and my dad got divorced. And my mom moved to Washington State, and she had custody of me. And so I moved to Washington State, a small little town right outside of Olympia, Washington. And then I would fly back to Hawaii for the summer times and live and stay with my dad. And so, you know, I was a good kid growing up, played sports, played basketball, baseball, and football. And my dad ended up moving to Washington State when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And like I said, my mom had custody of me. And so my mom was working a lot. And so I was always with like a caretaker. And so I had a lot of freedom, you know, as a kid. And like I said, I was a good kid. I made good grades and, you know, everything was going really well, you know, in elementary. And then when you go middle school, and then intermediate school. And then when things started getting kind of rough for me during middle school.
And for our Australian audience, middle school is 12?
Middle school is
13?
Let's see, 6th and 7th grade.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right before high school.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
So what happened in middle school that sort of pushed you to that? Was it peer pressure? Was it bullying? What was the situation there?
I mean, you know, so there was a group of us friends, you know, and we played sports together, and their parents smoked cigarettes. And so we'd go start stealing the parents' cigarettes, you know. And I remember then after school, there was a pool hall right down the road from the middle school I was going to. And I remember the first time I was smoking a cigarette behind the pool hall, and a police officer drove by and saw me, you know, saw a group of us. And I ran back inside the pool hall and sat down, and the police officer came in and grabbed me, and he called my dad. And I don't know if my dad had to come pick me up from the pool or he took me to my dad's house, you know. And that was like the first time I had like a run-in with the police officer, you know, for smoking cigarettes at 13 years old, you know. And so it just started off as, you know, a group of us kids just, you know, stealing cigarettes and smoking cigarettes. And then, you know, one of my friends had older brothers and they smoked weed. And so, you know, it wasn't definitely no peer pressure. It was just like,
it was just a thing to do. Young boys being young boys.
Exactly. You know, and then, when you get into, you know, you start doing it more than after school, you're going to your friend's house and you're smoking weed after school, right across the street from the middle school. And, you know, so it started smoking cigarettes at 13, and then it, you know, progressed to drinking and smoking marijuana at like 14 and 15 years old, and then, we're in high school, and that's when, started using cocaine at 16. And then, from 16 to 33, I was addicted to methamphetamines.
Do you think, I mean, so for you, when you were back at school, and, I've done my fair share of some of those things as well in my teenage years, do you think kids nowadays, what chance do they have of trying to avoid these things? Like how hard it must be even now, 20 years later or more, of like what kids are
Yeah.
going through now, how much even more prevalent all of that is now.
I can only imagine, because as time has went on, things have progressed a lot faster, and just even with technology, and you know, people can watch, people using drugs, or smoking weed just in music videos, drinking and music videos, and so it's like everything has progressed so much faster, and I can only imagine, it seemed like, I mean, there's quite a few people that weren't indulging in the things that I was indulging in middle school and high school. But I'm sure it's there, I'm sure it's there. I'm sure it's there even more now,
Yeah, it's something I definitely think about, just how hard it is. Like, I know how, yeah, like what you're talking about, you just know people. Nowadays, it's like, there must be even more people and even more prevalent.
Yeah, and it's like, I remember growing up, there would be kids that were like getting in trouble at a younger age, and then something would happen and they would kind of turn their life around during high school, and you know not get into so much trouble. And I remember before I started using methamphetamines, one of my good friends, his older brother used meth. And, at the time we were just smoking and drinking, but I just remember telling him, I'm like, man, your older brother used methamphetamines. That's crazy. I could never imagine doing that. And
Wow.
within a year, less than 2 years from then, I was a full, addicted to meth, smoking meth every day, and so it was like, there was nothing that, you know, I would say led me down the path and lifestyle that I lived. What my parents, they didn't, there was no drugs or, in the house or anything like that. So it was like, I mean, I made all the decisions, that led me down that path.
Was it easy to come by those things like the meth and weed? Was it really because you already, I guess you said someone's older brother was using it. It's just kind of easy to come by. It's not like there's too many bridges to cross. It's like, hey, grab me some as well.
Exactly, right? And I mean, that's all it is you have some older brothers that, some friends' older brothers that are 2 or 3 years older. So they're already more experienced in, smoking marijuana and drinking and stuff. And so you hang out with your friends and their older brothers are doing this stuff. So it was just like kind of one thing just led into another. And I was definitely not peer pressured into it at all. It was just a group of us kind of just experimenting, and then things just really progressed fast. I mean, as soon as I started smoking marijuana, it was like, I mean, drinking, it was just like things just really progressed fast, you know?
That is something that I definitely wanted to ask you about, because I guess if you never and I guess maybe even your advice is, because I think that if you start smoking cigarettes, it's really just easy to get to the next one, and it's really then easy to get to the next one, like you just said, that things progress really, really quick, or relatively quickly, right? So
Yeah.
I guess the emphasis, or not having point zero, not getting to point one on the Richter scale of substances is avoid that at all costs, because once you're on that train, I feel like it's really hard to get off the train.
Absolutely, and there's, like I said, things just progressed really, really fast. As far as kids nowadays, I have two nephews that are 13 and 11 years old, and they're starting to go through their trials.
Yeah.
And their trials now, and I stop and think back, I look at a 13-year-old now and I'm like, wow, they're so young. And then I think back about my life. I was that young when it all started, you know, and you know, as far as advice on how to not go down that path, you know, I think it's just very important. I think it's so important for parents to be there, you know, be there, and you know, kids active, you know, if they have the opportunity, you know, if their parents are members of the church, you know, like to be active in church activities, um and just, you know, like, I don't know, the gospel has showed me a whole new way of life, you know, and so now that I see the activities and, you know, the importance of playing games with your children and being active in your kids' life, it really makes a difference on the outcome, I think, you know, when they grow up, you know.
So let's go back. So you said that the police caught you the first time smoking behind the pool hall. At what stage after that did the police get involved in your life a bit more frequently?
You know, I was in a really dysfunctional relationship. I had a girlfriend. I was, you know, using meth every day, and got into domestic violence with her. And so the cops got called. I got arrested and went to jail for domestic violence. I got out of jail, and then there was a no contact order where I'm not allowed to be around her. And of course, we were together. And then her mom called the police on me, and they came and arrested me, and they searched my car and found meth in my car, found a meth pipe in my car. Then I went back to jail. And so that was like the start of my run-ins with the law. And I would say this is in 2004. So I was about 19 or 20 when, you know, things really, when I started having run-ins with the law, you know. And then, of course, when you get when you get arrested for drugs, then you have to go in and you have to take a urine analysis. And so you have to go into the courts, take a UA, and if you're dirty for drugs, they can, you know, put you in jail until you're done with your court. And so then I would, you know, be dirty, and I would go on the run, and then I would get picked up later on down the road for maybe another no contact order violation. And so I just started having the revolving door of just kind of being the justice system, being introduced to the justice system, you know, and
that just became normal. Was that just really normal then at that stage? Like, I've got to go do a UA, but I'm going to submit it, and then they're not going to know where I am anyway.
Yeah. So I'm just going to run from it. Yeah. And so I started running from my problems, and then I'll get arrested for something else. And then I'll have to do, you know, maybe I had to do 6 months in jail, or they gave me let me go to drug rehab instead, you know. So you kind of just I would just manipulate my way through the legal system, get caught for something. If I could get out of it by doing a drug treatment program, I'd go do the drug treatment program. And as soon as I got done with the drug treatment program, I'd go back to getting high.
At this point in your life, did you think that the prison system really wasn't helping? You just didn't care? It's like, I'll go in, I'll come back out, everything will be fine.
So I dealt with going to jail. So you have going to jail and then the prison system. I didn't go to prison until 2009. So I was just in and out of jail, you know, because it's like, and the difference between jail and prison here in America, I don't know about in Australia, but if you go to jail, it's anything less than a year. And if you go to prison, it's doing more than a year. Yeah. So if you get 365 days, you know, a sentence of a year or more, they'll send you to prison. But if you get a sentence of less than that, you'll do it in county jail. So by the time I went to county jail in 2004, I spent about 5 years of going in and out just for, you know, petty things, doing a 30 days here. I did a 6-month drug treatment program there, you know, just in and out, you know, here and there. So I didn't do any substantial amount of time. I think one time I did maybe 9 months or something like that. But it just became a way of life. And, you know, every time I would go in, it would just be, I just like almost be preparing myself to get out and go back to the same way of life, you know, because I'm in jail around the same people that I was running the streets with, you know, and it's just like a revolving door. You're in there and all you're really doing is preparing yourself to get out, you know, and go back to the streets.
And so in this really dark time, I'm going to describe it as dark. In this time, what was the height of it at? You were in and out of jail. Was that the height? Was there a point where you look back and go, okay, that was the top. That was really full on. That was really hectic.
things kind of progressed, you know, and I think I went over this with you guys, and I'll kind of read it because there were just so many things that, you know, throughout my meth addiction or throughout my addictions, these are the things that, and I have it written down, you know, these are the things that, you know, this is what my life was surrounded by, you know, and so stealing from friends and family, I would get very angry at my mom and blame her for all my problems, you know, very disrespectful to my mom in word, action, and deed. I was started selling drugs to feed my addictions, staying up for days at a time. I would tell myself that I loved drugs because they made me feel good. Um, you know, indulged in prostitutes, strippers, lots of immorality, pornography. I would degrade women and treat them with no respect. I've robbed people. I've been robbed. You know, I've been shot at. I've had friends that were killed in street violence. I've had friends that have, you know, overdosed on drugs, on heroin. There was a time where I was coming out of a trailer park and there was this lady who had OD'd on heroin, and we called 911 and I had to give her CPR until the ambulance got there, and it actually saved her life. You know, I used to, you know, it got really normal to see generations of families using drugs together. You know, like a mother and a daughter, a 40-year-old mother with a 20-year-old daughter. You know, and you know, brothers and sisters just using drugs with one another. You know, so it just became a normal way of life. You know, all this stuff that I'm talking about, this is what my life was around, you know, being around people stealing from stores, stealing cars, just living the fast life, you know, going to the casino every day. And so it was like, that's what my life consisted of. You know, I didn't know anybody that went and got a degree and had a career, you know, like, I mean, I knew a few people that maybe went and got a degree and, you know, had a good job at one point, but then kind of fell off because they got introduced to using meth, you know, but I ultimately, the lifestyle that I lived, I just lived in the moment, very you know, living in the moment, and just whatever I could do to, you know, stay high on drugs, live a life of lust with pornography and gambling. Those things right there were what I woke up and did each and every single day. But then there was also a point where, towards the end of my addiction, where I didn't have any money. I was sleeping in a tent, riding the bus to stay warm, and, you know, contemplating suicide and not even wanting to live. You know, so I experienced two different spectrums of addiction. And I just want to put it out there, like, I was a drug addict, you know, and so I would sell drugs just to feed my addiction. Everything I would do would just be to feed my addiction for that moment, you know. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but that lifestyle, you know, I remember the times I would go see my parents, you know, when I was addicted to meth, would just be maybe to show up on Christmas to get some Christmas presents and go back, you know. Or if I ended up going to jail, I would always call my mom or my dad, and they would, you know, when I'd hit rock bottom, it'd be like, you know, Mom and Dad, I'm in jail or I'm in rehab, you know, will you guys help me? And so that's how that all worked out.
With your parents, what do you think their attitude was? Would they help you thinking that they're going to help you long term? Or was it, we need to get him out of this situation that he's in right now and we'll worry about the rest later? Like, well, what was their attitude towards it all?
You know, so I don't know what it's like to be a parent, but I can only imagine, you know, I mean, being a parent and you see your child struggling with addiction, you want to be able, you kind of, I'm sure you just want to help them get out of whatever they're in, you know. And, you know, whether it was my mom or my dad, you know, it's like, they were there to support me. And every time, you know, it's like I'm sitting in jail and I'm like, Mom, I'm going to change my life this time. Of course, my mom wants to support me and help me when I get out of jail and give me a place to stay and you know, help me get back on my feet and you know, change my life. But each and every single time, you know, I would go to jail and reach out to my parents, and they'd be there to support me. And as soon as I would get out, go to their house, and then I would just go straight back to the streets.
Did you genuinely think that you would change, or was it just more you tell people that you change? Or did you think, you know what, this is the last time I'm going to jail. Next time it'll be different?
You know, when you first go to jail, you tell yourself, oh, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore right at the moment, you know. But I think there was one time there was a moment where I was like, okay, I'm not going to use drugs anymore. And I remember I was doing a drug treatment program in jail. And as you do time in jail, then you do work release, where you get a job and you get to go to work, and then you get to do part of it at home on electric home monitoring, you know. And I remember when I was in the jail, I was working in the kitchen, and I told myself, you know what, I'm going to get sober, Michael. And then I got to work release, and you get a little bit more, you get that freedom, you know, and you're going to work and everything. And then it's like, oh, okay. And by the time I got to the electric home monitoring, I was figuring out a way to call one of my girlfriends to get some drugs and meet me at my, you know, come to my house and get high together. So it was just like,
just a vicious cycle.
Yeah, you know, and it's really, really hard to get out of when, you know, when you're in a community and ultimately that I started at such a young age. That's really all I knew, you know, as an adult, you know, is that lifestyle. And then, you know, when you're using drugs, the lust that comes with it, and the pornography, and then the gambling, it's like that, the lust, the drugs, and the pornography, and the gambling all went hand in hand, because it was like, you get high, you indulge in, you know, immorality, you know, lust. And then it's like, okay, at the end of the night, it's time to go to the casino. And then you go to the casino and you run into all your drug addict friends that you know. And so it's just like a lifestyle. It becomes a lifestyle and a revolving door. And so everybody's out, you know, everybody in that lifestyle you got people that are stealing cars, robbing homes. You got women that are out there, strippers, prostitutes. You know, everybody's got their, you know, you got people selling drugs. Everybody's got their hustle that they have in the streets. And then at the end of the night, it's like everybody meets up at the casino.
It is a movement. It is a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about just this incredible moment where you're in prison or you're in jail for the last time, and this moment where someone hands you a Bible. Can you give us a little bit of a background on how you ended up coming across that Bible, or what it was that got you to say, hey, I want to read something while I'm here, I'm so bored?
So when it was all said and done, I spent about 4 years of my life incarcerated, whether it was in prison, jail. You know, I did 3 drug treatment programs. I ended up in the psychiatric unit. You know, been to jail for domestic violence, no contact orders, possession of meth, delivery of meth, possession of stolen property, theft of a motor vehicle. Okay, so as soon as I got to prison, I went to a church service. It wasn't LDS, and I was given a King James Bible. And I went back to my cell and read the King James Bible from front to back in about 3 weeks. And then in early January of 2018, I was walking to my cell one day, and someone asked me, the next door cellie right next door to me asked me if I wanted to read the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price. And it's actually this exact book. And I looked at it, and all I could see was the gold writing on it. So I thought to myself, they must go hand in hand. And little did I find out later on that they did go hand in hand, you know. But I just remember I read the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price in about 11 days. But I just remember reading about Alma the Younger and the sons of Mosiah living in sin and iniquity, being visited by an angel of the Lord, them repenting of their sins, them being reborn and becoming an instrument in the hands of God. And I just remembered that it gave me so much hope and inspiration that I could change my life, you know. And I mean, some of the scriptures that really touched home with me was Alma. We'll go to Alma 36.
I'm going to find it in my scriptures right here as well.
Yeah, so is Alma 36, and we'll go through 23 through 27. But behold, my limbs did receive their strength again, and I stood upon my feet and did manifest unto the people that I had been born of God. Yet, and from that time even until now, I have labored without ceasing, that I might bring souls unto repentance, that I might bring them to taste of the exceeding joy of which I did taste, that I might also be born of God and be filled with the Holy Ghost. Yet and now, behold, O my son, the Lord doth give me exceedingly great joy in the fruit of my labors. For because of the word which has been imparted unto me, behold, many have been born of God, and have tasted as I have tasted, and have seen eye to eye as I have seen. Therefore they do know these things which I have spoken, as I do know. And the knowledge which I have is of God. And I've been supported under trials and troubles of every kind, yet in all manner of afflictions. Yet God has delivered me from prison and from bonds and from death. Yet, and I do put my trust in him, and he will still deliver me. Now, these scriptures, when I'm sitting in this 6x10 prison cell, I'm filled with the feeling I'd never experienced in my whole life. I was filled with so much peace, love, joy, and happiness, and I remember calling my mom from prison, and I said, Mom, when I get out of prison, I'm going to become a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And she said, Michael, what are you talking about? Because how many times have I called from jail, rehab, that I was going to change my life, but this time it was something different. And when I was in prison, what I did is as soon as I read the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price for the first time, I started reading a chapter in the morning and a chapter in the evening. And it's something I continue to do to this day. And what it did is it started, it planted a seed in my heart, reading the scriptures, planted a seed in my heart, and I just started nourishing that seed by reading my scriptures every day. And I remember they sent me to a camp, and I'm sitting on a chair with 50 people. And people are coming up to me, and they're like, you don't want to be a Mormon. It's a cult. Why would you want to be part of a religion that, you don't use drugs, you can't just have sex with women and things like that. But I had experienced enough in my life that I wasn't going to follow anybody else's lead. I had followed people my whole life. But this time I was ready to follow Jesus Christ, and nothing can take that feeling of that comfort and peace and joy and happiness from reading the scriptures in that prison cell. And that's where it was like it contradicted itself. How could I be sitting in a prison cell in the pits of hell and be filled with this feeling I'd never experienced in my whole life? By reading the scriptures. That's how I knew that the gospel was the truth. That's how I knew that the Book of Mormon was the truth. Because of the feelings I was having sitting in a prison cell. And so it took me outside of those prison walls. And it gave me so much hope. And as you read about Alma the Younger and the sons of Mosiah, them living in sin and iniquity at one point, and then you read at the end of Mosiah 27, them becoming an instrument in the hands of God, I'm thinking to myself, oh, Michael, that could be me. And that's what really started the repentance process. That's when it clicked in my head. Ooh, Satan's had control over my life through all my addictions. I didn't realize that before. But it took me having to be in prison and be in the pits of hell, being taken away from the world, away from drugs, women, the casino, everything, and building a relationship with Jesus Christ. Then I realized, oh, Michael, Satan had complete control over me through my addictions. And that's when the repentance process started. And by reading my scriptures, it started changing my ways of thinking and my behaviors and my beliefs. And it gave me a different outlook of, wow, through all my addictions, Satan's had complete control over my life. And that's when I made the decision that, you know what, I'm ready to walk in a whole new way of life. And that was really the start of this miraculous conversion. And that was, in December, it'll be 7 years that I walked into prison, 7 years ago.
How inspiring that someone's, you've got a Bible and then you've been given a Book of Mormon second. Because I imagine if someone gave you a Book of Mormon first, that would be totally foreign. Like, what is this? But I guess if you got a Bible first, you can kind of, well, I already know what a Bible is. So, but if you got a Book of Mormon first, well, what's a Book of Mormon?
I don't know. All I know is God's hand is in all the little details in our lives. And it's not a coincidence that I battled addictions for 20 years of my life. It's not a coincidence that I ended up in prison and went to a church service and was given a King James Bible. it's not a coincidence that I read the Book of Mormon after I read the King James Bible. To me, this is all part of my journey in life. And, you know, I stop and think about all the trials. You know, I went over some of the trials and the tribulations, and that's just this barely touching the surface of the things that happened, you know, in my addictions. But I realized that we come to earth to have an experience. And now that I've had this experience and with all these trials and tribulations, you know, and I wish it upon nobody, and there's plenty of people that have had far worse trials and tribulations. But now, through the gospel of Jesus Christ, I've been able to learn from these experiences, but now I've got wisdom, you know, and with wisdom, you know, and me coming to the gospel and not just coming to the, you know, reading the scriptures, but after getting out of prison, coming to the church and, you know, being baptized in the church and progressing to where I'm at now with over 6.5 years of sobriety, being a member of the church for over 5 years now, you know, where I'm at now I can take all that experience of all those trials and tribulations and help other people.
You talk about helping other people. So when you got out of prison, did your first thought go, well, I need to speak to my mom about this, or I need to find missionaries? Like, what was your...
So I got out of prison, and of course I started taking lessons with the sister missionaries.
Did you find them? How did you come across the sisters?
Well, I got out of prison and went to church.
Oh, so you literally got out of prison, just went, where's the closest ward?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more to the story than that. Like, so I was in work release. So I was in prison went to prison December, and then March, April, they sent me to a halfway house, which is through the prison, but it's a work release where you can go work, but you come back to the halfway house every night until you're done with your prison sentence. So I was there, and they allow you to go to church if you want to go to church, or, you know, and so I kept calling the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from the work release, and no one would pick up the phone. And so in order for you to be able to go to church, they have to know what time church starts and what time church ends, the prison work release. Well, I kept calling the church and no one would pick up the phone. And it would just ring and ring and ring and ring. And so while I was in the prison work release, I knew I wanted, you know, I'm reading my scriptures every day, a chapter in the morning, a chapter in the evening, and I know I want to go to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but no one's picking up the phone and I don't know what time the church starts. And so, and in order for me to go, I have to, the prison guards have to know what time it starts, what time it ends, you know, how long it's going to take you to get there. They need to know, they have to have all the information before they allow you to walk or catch the bus to the church. Well, like I said, no one would pick up the phone. So I started going to other churches. I went to a Lutheran church. I went to a Unity church. I went to, Jehovah's Witness. You know, so I went to all these different denominations, you know, knowing that as soon as I get out of prison, you know, the work release, I'm going straight to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And sure enough, 2 weeks before I'm getting ready to get out, in August of 2018, like the first week of August, I get a phone call, and somebody from the church got my message and called the work release and told the work release what time church service was. So I actually got to attend church my last week while I was at the halfway house. And I got to attend church and went to church, and the elders quorum president walked right up to me. You know, obviously I was, you know, new to the church, and I had my Book of Mormon and my scriptures with me, and he sat next to me, and that was my, you know, and he just befriended me, and we became really good friends. And as soon as I got released, I started going to his house, catching the bus and going to his house to have lessons with the sister missionaries. As soon as I got out of prison, that's when I started going to the addiction recovery program. And I remember I got out of prison on a Tuesday and went to my first addiction recovery program meeting. And I go into this meeting, and I'm sitting in a room with doctors and lawyers and dentists and police officers. I never knew anybody like that. And guess what? I sat down, told them my story that I just gotten out of prison, put everything on the table, and they showed me so much love and kindness. And that's when I realized that no matter what walk of life you come from, we all have one thing in common, and that's Jesus Christ. And their kindness that I felt at the addiction recovery program, the same kindness that I felt when I started attending church, played a pivotal point in me, following through, and coming to the church, and I just remember I couldn't be baptized right away. I was ready to be baptized as soon as I got out of prison, because after reading the scriptures, I knew. And what happened is when that seed got planted in my heart in that prison cell, I just kept reading the scriptures, and it just kept nourishing that seed. And I just started getting momentum and momentum and momentum. And, I get out of prison and the addiction recovery program, the elders quorum president, we became really good friends. And, he told me, have you ever heard of the BYU Idaho Pathway program?
Yes. Yep.
So he's like, Michael, have you ever heard of the BYU Idaho Pathway program? And so sure enough, I wasn't even a member. They let him vouch for me. And I get out of prison in August and start the BYU Idaho Pathway program in September.
Wow.
And so I get out of prison. I'm living in a clean and sober house, going to church, addiction recovery program meetings, self-reliance classes through the church, the BYU Idaho Pathway program. I started going to self-help groups and, centered around the gospel of Jesus Christ. So next thing you know, I'm out of prison and everything is centered around the gospel. And I'm going over to the elders quorum president's house and having lessons with the sister missionaries every week. And so what happened is I couldn't be baptized right away, because you have to wait a year after you have to wait until you're either off probation. Yeah, you have to wait until you're off of probation to get baptized in the church. And the mission president, because the sister missionaries were, talking to the mission president, I went and had a meeting with him, and he wrote a letter of recommendation to the first presidency, because he saw everything that was kind of happening in my life and everything I was doing, and he wrote a letter of recommendation, and we didn't hear anything for about 6 months. And then in March of 2019, the sister missionaries called and they said, Michael, the first presidency found you worthy to be baptized. And so
what an amazing time.
I was later baptized April 6th of 2019. And what a great, glorious day to be baptized on Christ's birthday and the 189th anniversary of the church being organized.
That's so much. That's so incredible.
That is amazing.
That is seriously so incredible. That time, the idea that when you got out, you were going to other churches, and that still wasn't enough, and you still wanted to find the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so you kept looking, and then finally, mercifully, someone put you first, and calls you back after this message. That you left them. When you walked in the building for the first time, we're talking a lot at the moment. The brethren are talking a lot at the moment about ministering to the one, and people feeling welcome at church. When you first walked in, what was it like after all this time? You've got to the church after reading it in prison and calling, and then finally you walked in. Did you feel home? Did you feel like the elders quorum president, was he waiting for you? What was that church experience like?
I went and sat down. I had my scriptures like this, just like this. I went and sat down, and he sat down and befriended me and asked me who I was. And I told him, and we just developed a relationship right there. And the love and kindness that I felt there is the same love and kindness I felt in my first addiction recovery program meeting, the same love and kindness that I felt, when I decided to go to BYU Idaho, the same love and kindness that I felt in South Carolina last summer, and the same love and kindness that I felt here in Arizona, the same love and kindness that I feel when I talked to you guys for the very first time last week, the same love and kindness. It's genuine, it's genuine, and no one's ever judged me. No one's ever judged me. And I've been able to put all this on the table. And that's, this is what, putting everything on the table for me, everybody's different, but for me to be able to put everything on the table and say, you know what, I'm ready to walk in a whole new way of life, and to have the people there support me. And when I got out of prison, I didn't have a car. I had to ride the bus. And I lived in a clean and sober house. And guess what? Next thing you know, people are picking me up to go to church. people are picking me up to go to the addiction recovery program meetings. Oh, and then guess what? Families are inviting me over to their house for Thanksgiving. Here I am, straight out of prison, and members of the church are inviting me over, and they're business owners and doctors and dentists, and they're inviting me over with their families and their extended families for Thanksgiving dinner. For the average person, that might not be a big deal. But for me, that kindness meant everything. That kindness and love from everybody meant everything to me. And not to be judged, oh man. But it's the same love and kindness that I felt everywhere. Everywhere. And people have allowed me just to share my story. And it means so much to me. It means so much to me, and while I was going through the trials and tribulations, I had no idea that all my weaknesses could be turned into strengths. And then all those strengths turned into talents. And through the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we've just really just started, there's just so much more. We're only about halfway through. This is only
going to 2020. We haven't even got into 2020 yet. This is just until 2019. So much
what we've talked about so far, but everybody just showed me so much love and kindness. And I'm going to tell you, the love and kindness didn't just affect me, but, I eventually got a car, and a member of the church gave me a job working for a construction company. He was a subcontractor. He owned a sheet metal company. And I became in 2019, I got baptized in the church, but I became a material handler. And so I drove a big 26-foot box truck, right? And so as I'm driving this, big 26-foot box truck, I'm driving, I'll load it up with the materials and take it to the job sites. And that's what really kind of started piquing my interest in construction, and so then in late 2019 or early 2020, my mom, so she lived on a 10-acre farm, and she sold her farm. And so she needed a place to move to. And so, of course, I was at church one day, and I found a member of the church who had a house for rent. And so I introduced my mom to the person who had the house for rent. And next thing you know, my mom rents a house from a member of the church. And then, of course, my mom, she has so much stuff. She had to get rid of a lot of stuff, but she has so much stuff. And my mom's 78 now. So this is back in 2020. So this is 4 years ago. So she was 70. My mom's a little bit older, she was 74, 75. And so when it came time for her to move, it was like the guy that I worked for, who's a member of the church, let me use the big moving trucks. And the next thing you know, it's time to move, and you got missionaries coming over. You got friends from the ward, elders quorum. My mom got to sit back, and we packed up her whole house and moved her to this new place, and got her moved into this new her new house. And sure enough, the owners of the house, that were renting the house, said, "Hey, Margot, is it all right if we have the missionaries come and help you unpack?" And my mom was like, "Sure, we'd love to help." So the missionaries started coming and helping my mom unpack the house, And then sure enough, they're coming by teaching my mom lessons once a week. And then I'm coming in and joining them for lessons, And my mom, then I'd come and we'd find these videos on Joseph Smith, and we're learning. And I'm, I had this major conversion to the church, to the gospel, and my mom was there for my baptism when I was baptized in 2019. But my mom started building a testimony for herself. But you know what it all started with? The love and kindness from everybody in the church. And then the sister missionaries coming, helping her unpack. And then them coming and teaching her lessons. And so I have this conversion, but she has to find a testimony for herself. And after 6 months of those sister missionaries coming every week, my mom was ready to be baptized. And so I was ordained to the Melchizedek priesthood and then baptized and confirmed my mom into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, October of 2020.
That's amazing. The fact that you got to baptize your mom, I mean, that must have been just a high point in your life, I could imagine.
Yes, and I mentioned some of the things I read to you, when I was in my active addiction, how I used to treat my mom, and so it's so interesting how you have a dysfunctional relationship with your mom for so many years while I'm battling addictions. And then I come to the gospel, and now me and my mom, we're the best of friends. She's my companion in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and so my mom was baptized in 2020. And then that's when I made the decision. I'd already done the BYU Idaho Pathway Program, but that's when I made the decision to go to BYU Idaho and major in construction management. And so in 2021, in January of 2021, I packed my bags up and moved to Rexburg, Idaho, and moved into student housing. And so here I am, 36 years old, living in student housing, and I have roommates that are 18, 19, 20, kids coming back from missions, leaving on missions, and I'm at BYU Idaho, majoring in construction management.
That is yeah, what an amazing time to get there. And I know we're connected on social media, and I know the love you've got for your mum. You spend so much time together going through church historical sites, and just spending time with each other, building each other's testimonies, and just sharing those amazing experiences in the gospel together must just be the greatest.
It's absolutely amazing. This last summer I was on an internship in South Carolina, and she flew out to South Carolina, and we drove back across the country, back to Idaho. And we went up to Washington, D.C., and, we got to visit Washington, D.C., which was really cool, and go to the temple there. But then we went to Palmyra, New York. We got to go to the Hill Cumorah. We got to go to the Sacred Grove. And from there, we got to go see where the Book of Mormon was printed. The first copies of the Book of Mormon was printed. And I have, a testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ to the fullest. But going on this church history journey from Palmyra to Kirtland, Ohio, to see all the persecution that Joseph Smith and those saints had to deal with, and to see, the Kirtland Temple, and to see that, and then go to Missouri, and then we went to Nauvoo. Then we went to, the Nauvoo, the Carthage jail where Joseph Smith was martyred. We got to go to Missouri, got to go to Independence, Adamondiaman. But that church historical trip, nothing is going to stop the progression of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Nothing. And to see where it all started, that young boy who was prepared at a young age to serve a mission for Jesus Christ. Listen, it was the most amazing experience, but not just to be there, but to be there with my mother. Yeah. And that's a trip that I always remember with me and my mom, because it was like, out of all the pain and suffering throughout all my addictions and our dysfunctional relationship and my addictions, and then to come to the gospel, us to be members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to have this miraculous transformation. Went to BYU Idaho, majoring in construction management, and then to be on an internship in South Carolina, and my mom to come and us to travel across the country and see this. It's something that, it's one of my most memorable moments with my mom, and it's something that just solidifies the truth of the gospel. To be able to be there when you're reading the Doctrine and Covenants, and to be able to be there in the same places where those revelations were written, to be there. Listen, the Spirit there, it's so amazing, and it's just so inspiring, because Joseph Smith had a vision. And these witnesses had a vision. And the early church members had a vision. And from there, to print out the Book of Mormon, and that's when it started. Okay, not only is the church, the organization of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but now, this is a time where, can you just imagine Joseph Smith in the 1830s, right? His ability to see in the future, right? Because here now, 200 years later, right? Me and you were having a podcast sharing my conversion story to the gospel, but it all started with the Book of Mormon and missionaries going out and sharing the gospel.
Yeah.
And from one country to the next country. And I don't know when they got to Australia, but I'm sure it plays a big role on, how you guys are members of the church, how I'm a member of the church, but it's just so inspiring and it's just so powerful. Nothing is going to stop the progression. All the persecution that happened, nothing is going to stop the progression. And Joseph Smith could see something that the average person couldn't see, and to see the Lord's kingdom being built upon the earth right now, all in preparation for our Lord and Savior's return. It's so inspiring because what we're doing right now, one person's going to be able to watch this podcast and it's going to give them hope. It's going to give them, increase their faith. They're going to think of ways of how they can share the gospel. And that's what it's all about, is sharing the gospel. That's what life is all about. And just like those missionaries that read the Book of Mormon for the first time and went out on their missions, it's not just a 2-year mission, it's a lifelong mission. And now it's like the fruits of the labor, it's like, it's amazing to be a part of the greatest work on earth.
It's so exciting to see the way that you describe it, because the thing that you read in the Book of Mormon was Alma, the sons of Mosiah, and I see that in you. You were at one level in your life, and now the excitement that shows when you talk about the scriptures, when you talk about the journey and Joseph Smith and the fact that we can live in a world now where the church can progress, the excitement, it radiates Sons of Mosiah, that when they got their conversion, straight away they wanted to go teach the Lamanites. And I see that in you. Straight away you want to go, look how exciting the church is. Look how enjoyable it can be. Your life can be turned around so much because of this spirit. And it truly is an inspiration to see you and to see the excitement.
As I tell my story, I wake up so excited for the future. What's next? What opportunities, because it's like, ultimately my heart, I want to serve. And I ultimately believe in my heart, the second coming of Jesus Christ is coming soon. It's coming soon. Like a thief in the night. When you think about a thief in the night, it's that fast. It's not, okay, we have a year left. He's going to be here. So why not prepare now? Why not prepare for his second coming now? And I'm just so inspired too, because everybody has their talents. And a talent that both you brothers coming together and having a podcast to share the gospel. Just think of the smile Christ has on his face right now in Heavenly Father. Just think about that. That's inspiring. You guys, it's Saturday right now. You guys could be, I'm sure it's nice weather over there. I don't know if it's summertime over here or getting ready to be summer. No, we're in spring right now, right? Yeah, we're in the spring. But getting ready to be summertime. I'm sure it's nice there. You could be at the beach. You could be having a good time. But we're here on a Saturday. I woke up and I went to the temple this morning and just got back right before this podcast. But we are helping build the Lord's kingdom in all aspects of life. And to me, it's so inspiring because I've had the opportunity to share my story 3 times this month, like 3 or 4 times on different podcasts and, that High Five Live interview. And to me, that's what life is all about. Because like with my story, one thing is I want people to know that no matter how far you have gone, or no matter how far you think you have gone, no matter what people may say about you, that through the atonement of Jesus Christ, we can be healed. Through the atonement of Jesus Christ is so powerful. It's so powerful, and it's priceless. You know, money can't buy drug addiction. You know, you can't say, okay, I have a drug addiction or a pornography or a gambling addiction. Here's $5 million. Just take this addiction away from me. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. You know, but through the gospel of Jesus Christ, it's possible. And I just know that through my experience, I want to give people hope. You know, and we're here to learn. We're here to learn. And so anybody that might be battling with a pornography addiction, it's okay. We're here on earth to learn. If we were perfect people, there would be no Jesus Christ. We're imperfect people here on earth. But through that, battling that addiction, and what I love about the church is that all the resources are here. We have the addiction recovery program, right? And so you go and you start sharing what you're, you know, these trials that you're going through. But when you go to a meeting and you see somebody that has went through those same things that you might be going through, or those battling some of the same addictions that you might be dealing with, and they've got 6 months of sobriety, it gives you a little bit of hope. Oh, they've went through what I'm going through right now. It gives somebody hope that, oh, you know what? I can get 6 months of sobriety. Then they meet somebody with a year of sobriety. Oh, I can get a year of sobriety. And I think what the greatest gift of going through these trials and tribulations and experiences are, when you overcome those trials, it's so important to reach out and help other people with those experiences, you know, and because it gives people hope. And seeing is believing. If you see somebody that has been struggling with it, if you see somebody that you know has battled an addiction for 20 years and has been able to be, you know, through the atonement to be healed from those addictions, it's going to inspire someone that they can change their life. And here I am, was addicted to drugs for 20 years, but now, you know, now I can take those experiences and I can help others. And how am I helping others? I'm sharing my story. And how am I being able to share this story? These two great guys that reached out to me, two brothers from Australia, a video of me sharing my story reached out to me. So it's like we all have parts. We all play different parts in building the kingdom. And it's just so inspiring to me.
That's just incredible. That's just so incredible. So grateful to have you on. We're so grateful to be able to talk to you. And I really feel pumped up, and I really feel like that we should keep going, and we should, in our own lives and in our own personal battles, we should always keep going. And the gospel is there for us. You're so right. There's so much. There's nothing that we can't come back from. There's nothing that we can't get help from. And if we're surrounded by loving people in our wards, or we're surrounded by loving people in our communities, then there's really nothing that we can't overcome as a group. And we're not alone. We're never alone. And even when we feel alone, we still have Christ with us. And then we're physically together in the temple. We're physically together at church, and we've always got Christ looking after us and always guiding us on what we should, where we should be, and putting opportunities in front of us to, well, this is next. This is next. You know, the fact that you're a qualified person, and you're a professional in your field, and you're an incredible speaker, and you're using your own message to push the gospel forward, is exactly what Christ would want. You're doing an amazing job, and I feel so fortunate to talk to you today, and I honestly feel so inspired.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such a blessing, you know, for these opportunities. And what's so great about it is it's just the beginning. You know, I don't know how many miles apart we are from one another, but ultimately through the gospel, we are so close to one another, you know, and to be able to share a message and for us to be able to develop such a, I mean, this is amazing. Just think about it. Just think about it. We've known each other. Look at this conversation we're having. This is what the gospel is all about. We've known each other a total of 2 hours personally. Yeah. And look at what the discussions that we're having. This is what the gospel brings. We talked an hour last week, and this is another hour this week. We've talked in person or through Zoom for 2 hours, and look at the discussion that we've had. That is amazing. Yeah, talk. I don't know. It is truly divine the way everything, when you're doing something good, how sincere, authentic, and I think, I was talking to my mom, and she said something very, very, I like it. She said, Michael, when you speak, you're very authentic. And then it clicked in my head, or I don't know if she said it to me or what have you, but authenticity comes from being vulnerable and putting everything on the table. And that's what, I think with my stories, it's authentic because I'm putting it on the table. I know that, the things that I have implemented in my life, and it's so important. I read my scriptures every day. I pray. Go to church on Sundays. The addiction recovery program. I go to the temple at least every other week. Implementing these practices in my life is the reason why I'm where I'm at. And I know that if I was to say, you know what? Oh, I did this all myself. I don't need to read my scriptures. I don't need to go to the temple. I don't need to go to church. I've got almost 7 years of sobriety. I don't need anybody. I know that I could go right back that way of life in a heartbeat. And the thing about it is the greatest joy is helping other people. The greatest happiness is sharing the word of God. The greatest happiness is watching other people that are going through their trials and tribulations and helping them, being kind to them. When they come into church, introducing yourself to them, inviting them over to your house, no matter, inviting them over for Thanksgiving. All those little things played such a pivotal role in my conversion to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And in the bottom of my heart, I know that it was not a coincidence the way everything happened. It was not a coincidence. So I'm grateful for you, both you brothers. And it's not a coincidence that we're on this podcast right now. And I know that someone's going to be able to watch this and it's going to really touch their heart, and I want to thank you guys for making it happen. And the greatest thing about it is this is just the first podcast of many years to come, and so I'm honored to be on here, and I just love you guys from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate that. I mean, hearing your testimony, I feel the Spirit so strong. Just everything about you just radiates the gospel, and it's just incredible. And we're so grateful that we've had this opportunity to speak to you. The fact that Daniel felt inspired to speak to you, I understand it now. I see it now. The things that you're saying has touched me so incredibly strong, and the Spirit can just, I hope everyone that listens to this truly feels that Spirit, and I'm sure they will. If this can affect one person, I'll be so grateful. But I know that your message is going to affect so many people. And, your situation, unfortunately, it's not unique. There's a lot of people going through struggles. And I'm grateful that we have the gospel in our lives that we can share, and the Holy Ghost can touch others, and they can really show the change, the mighty change of heart that you've gone through, and that others can go through because of it. So we are very, very much grateful for you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We appreciate everyone listening to If You Could Hide to Kolob podcast, and we'll see you again. Thank you.